Excuse me a second. Hi. Excuse me. Hi, I'm Calvin Cox. This is May 16, 2013. It's Thursday night, and it's 9:22 p.m. And what I wanted to talk about, oh, excuse me a second. What I want to talk about this evening was that because it has to do with weather, and it has to do with the ocean being a heat sink. You know, it absorbs heat and does give it off, but it tends to hold heat more than a plant leaf, more than something painted white. It holds it, absorbs it, and it'll hold it longer. But eventually, of course, it will give it off. But the point is, the oceans are like a heat sink, and they go through cycles of absorbing and giving off on a daily cycle and on a yearly seasonal cycle. And so the ocean being a heat sink, it affects the weather, and because it's water, and the ocean gives off water vapor, being moisture, which rises and combines with heat, and the wind blows it around, and so that's all figured into the weather patterns somehow. The weather patterns are not so easily understandable all the time, and on a global scale, the interaction of the North Pole, South Pole, the equator, all the different interactions of the weather at different levels, the moisture content, the heat, the way the wind's blowing, all of that. But the ocean is one of the main things that helps drive the weather, and my personal opinion, it needs to be understood better. And the only way to really, and something also that's going on with the ocean is it's becoming more acid. Its acidity has increased like a lot. I don't want to quote an exact number, but it's significant. Snails are having trouble forming their shells, and other sea creatures are having trouble forming their shells because their outer shell, their little home they live in, because the water is becoming too acid. When people go to the beach and they go swimming in that water, you know, it's not so acid that it's going to eat you or something, not a person, but it's acid enough that some sea creatures, it is interfering with them significantly. So what I'm going to propose is that hold on a minute, I got to get another piece of board. What I'm propose is that an ocean autonomous ocean autonomous, if I spell that correctly, vehicle. Okay, ocean autonomous vehicle be developed by shoot, just lost my cap. Be developed by scientists that can be used in a unique way. Let's say we've got a big ocean here, and there's going to be a grid of like this, longitude and latitude lines, and let's say from this point here to this point here is, you know, let's say 100 miles. And this vehicle is going to be designed so I don't know what you would make it look like, but it would be designed so that every day, maybe once a day, or perhaps twice a day, it floats on the surface, and you know, it would have like a little antenna, and it would have a onboard compass, and it would know which way it's oriented, and it would have like a little wind thing here with propeller blades that it spins, and it collects wind speed and wind direction and temperature and its humidity and all these interesting things. But then either once or twice or maybe even 3 or 4 times a day, it would take on water. It would have, like, you know, little internal tanks. It would have a solar cell panel that is waterproofed, and this thing could sink down to like 1,000 feet, perhaps, maybe further. Because what I found out reading, the water in the middle of the summer, it gets real warm, fairly warm down to a point. And then there's another line where it's kind of intermediate temperature, and then there's another area that's even colder. Well, what I'm proposing is, and this thing would also have a little propeller here, and an onboard battery, a GPS unit, and also perhaps even a little gathering area. They can gather little tiny water samples at different depths as it goes down. That somehow it'd be able to figure out, at a start point, it would get its GPS location, and then as it sank, you could, I guess, have it sink, you know, at a certain rate of speed. And then so if there was a current underneath, water current going this way, if it took it an hour to go to 1,000 feet depth and recording temperature, salinity, acidity, tons of other measurements as it sank at different levels and temperatures and on down. So it's gathering data as it's sinking and recording it. Then when it gets down to 1,000 foot depth, or maybe it will go to 2,000 feet. I don't know. It's important. What I'm saying is, it's important to know the temperature and salinity and acidity and everything, and how turbid the water is, if it's fairly clear, not just 10 feet down into the water. Okay? It's true that a lot of your interactions having to do with weather occur in the first 10 or 20 feet or something, where the water is being heated the most. But there could be game-changing information we do not know about yet, and you'll never find out if you don't implement something like this that can go down and take, you know, all these measurements way, way, way down into the water, and then have it rise back up at the same rate at which it descended. Okay? And the reason for this is, then when it pops up over here, it alerts, it takes a GPS measurement, and then it figures out, okay, how far it went, and collects that information. And I guess every night this information will be relayed to a satellite, which would go to a data bank and start creating maps and information maps, not just of the locations and how far it traveled and where that current, that specific current in the ocean, which way it goes, but would also all the information relating to other areas in the ocean and other information that's being collected. That's very useful. You can't, it's like me trying to understand weather with just turning on the radio. You know, that's all I know. Well, basically, what we have in place now around the world is such a pitiful method of gathering useful information. Some of it we only gather on very surface temperature, not even 1 foot down, because of certain, you have to go read about it, certain things that have to do with reflection and stuff like that. We have satellites now measuring a lot of this sea surface temperature, but it's really just at the surface. It's not even 1 foot down because of certain situations with reflectivity off of the water, on and on and on. You can't really rely on that information. It's not really solid body of information. So when I say me just listening to the radio, that's very simplistic. You go start getting on the internet and you start typing in weather and trying to understand weather and fronts and evaporation rate and on and on and on, near bodies of water, and whole other things start to figure into the weather picture. And then if you dig even further, you find out other things, and then dig further, you find out other things. There's a whole massive body of things that are all interconnected. My point with this, we're dicking around with little crap on the surface, we're missing the whole ball game underneath. Okay? Could be very important. I know acidity needs to be measured at different depths, because mankind's going to have to do something about that ocean acidification very, very soon. I have a rather interesting plan for that. But in totality, you need to figure out what the oceans are doing. Also, there probably should be something that would be a lot larger, that would be sunk down on the bottom, okay, in a grid pattern, every 100 miles square, whatever, I guess, to start with, or maybe every 200 miles, I'm not sure. But eventually, you would want that grid to get down to probably every 10 miles between, okay? And another thing, the grid eventually one day would probably be 10 miles between each station on the surface and perhaps each station on the bottom. To get a really firm grasp on, and you're talking maybe 50, 100 years in the future, you might get that detailed. But for now, probably every 100 mile, this way and that way, or maybe every 50 miles, it would, I think, provide enough of a new viewpoint on what's going on in the ocean to help stimulate more activity and more action towards not only caring for the ocean, but getting a better grasp on the weather, what is causing our weather, other intricacies we've never considered. We're going to definitely find, and that's useful to know that it's necessary. I'm thinking these things could be reprogrammed. Where it ends up here is it sinks and would probably go with a current and end up here. After it records its information here, then it would use its little propeller to propel itself back to its original start point, which it would find again from the GPS signal coming down to it. Now, right below it on the ocean floor, perhaps would be a ship would originally set the larger body down in the bottom, and it would have perhaps every week, maybe it would release, I'm thinking what it would do is release a little capsule that would float up, and it would be programmed at every 500 feet or every 1,000 feet. A little hatch would open up and it would take a little water sample and take that. It would eventually, this thing would float all the way up to the surface. And if this upper unit could go ahead. Now remember, this one would also be recording if it's sunny out, if it's clear, partially cloudy, what if the wind is blowing, how strong it's blowing, what direction it's blowing. All kinds of surface information this thing could be recording. But and also however far it went down. But from where, if this thing only goes 2,000 feet down, but the bottom of the ocean is another 10,000 feet down, this little capsule that would be released as it went, it could, you know, be pre-programmed to take a sample every 1,000 feet and so on. The only thing that would need, as it took a little sample, probably, I'm thinking at this point, the only thing would be somehow take a quick temperature sense on the unit that it gathered, have something that could give you an accurate temperature reading inside that capsule. Now it goes up and gets the next reading, the next reading, the next reading, next reading. It goes up to, you know, however many thousand feet that this didn't cover, and then from there it wouldn't take any more readings and it would just float up on top. Now, how or where you would gather up those capsules and do the remainder of the tests, I don't know. It would be a program where a ship goes around picking them all up. When they broke the surface, they could transmit a little signal to GPS and give their location, and then a ship could come by and pick them up. Or perhaps this little autonomous bot could pick them up. I don't know. But I know all the technology is there to do all this. And it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think it would, when these were being developed, the bottom one that sat and released gathering capsules that would float up and then be collected by a ship or one of these. And these were being, while they were being collected, NOAA could be developing the software to receive this information, and then it would be plotted, of course, into their computers and then generate maps, and then people could study those maps. I think it's something that would really be beneficial, something like this. I'm sure it would be, of course, rather high technology, but I'm sure all the technology we've already got for it now. Thanks.